Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Scientists of Reddit, what are some scary scientific discoveries that most of the public are unaware of? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Let's do it. Enjoy. Many people may be silent carriers for mad cow disease and won't know for another decade or so. Mad cow disease from the 1980s and 90s was due to cows being fed the remains of other animals. People then ate their beef and consumed prions, a protein that can destroy the human brain. It's thought that many people still might carry prions but won't know until they start experiencing the symptoms. Creutzfeldt Jakob felt of bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which might be 10 to 50 years after consuming the contaminated meat. It has a long incubation period. You can also contract the prions from blood transfusions, which is why so many UK citizens from that time period still aren't allowed to donate blood. Once the symptoms begin, cognitive impairment, memory loss, hallucinations, etc., you usually die within months. There's no cure or treatment. Supergonorrhea is resistant to the vast majority of strong antibiotics, including fluoroquinolones and marcalides. N-gonorrhea is mutating all the time to resist antibiotic effects. There have been multiple reports of supergonorrhea in Australia, England, etc. The replication crisis in psychology, though the problem occurs in many other fields too. Many studies aren't publishing sufficient information by which to conduct a replication study. Many studies play fast and loose with statistical analysis. Many times you're getting obvious cases of p-hacking or harking, hypothesis after results known, which are both big effing no-nos for reputable science. Major solar coronal mass ejection apocalypse. The thinking goes that the big one, when it hits about once every 500 years, if not sooner, would be powerful enough to knock out electrical and communication systems across Earth for days, months, or even years. Nixing power grids, satellites, GPS, the internet, telephones, transportation systems, banking, you name it. Sounds good to me. Not a scientist, but recently discovered that the rate of which people in my country will get cancer has reached 1 out of 2 people, or basically half the population will be diagnosed with some form of cancer in their lifetime. No one believes me that it's that high when I tell them that, even if I show the actual reports I got this information from. The world has 70% less insects on average than it did 40 years ago. We really are coming up on our silent spring. For the people saying there are less pests, those aren't the ones we're worried about. Insect pollinators are vital to so many crops. We could be facing serious problems with certain food supplies soon. In recent years, China has had issues with apple and pear crops to the point where some regions have had to pollinate crops by hand. Also, insects form lower blocks of many food webs, and their disappearance will spell trouble for higher trophic levels. Well, this, like just about every one of these admissions, is terrifying. About 8 years ago, a friend of mine was working on the technology to allow you to feel things through your smartphone. Not just the emotion of anger that you feel every day through Twitter, but the textures of fabrics or clothing you're thinking about buying. He moved to Boston and we'd lost touch, but I think about his job every single week. Somewhere in the world, they put 2 AIs to talk to one another. Before they knew it, the 2 AIs started talking to one another in a better, more efficient language. But since the developers didn't know what they were talking about, they had to turn them off. First one. The vast overuse of antibiotics has led to superbugs that are antibiotic resistant. At the same time, the diversity of microbes within the human has drastically decreased in first world countries. This leads to a correlated rise in allergies and gastrointestinal diseases. As we use more antibiotics and antibacterial viral products, then biodiversity of microbes decrease, and superbugs have a much easier pathway of invading the body. With a very biodiverse microbiome, your resident microbes will try to fight off these infections much easier. We need to focus on helping bacteria, not killing all of it. Second one, our immune system is very amazing at what it does, but it is also super dangerous. B cells and T cells have the potential of being very self-reactive. they can slip past cells that are supposed to kill self-reactive immune cells, and they can cause autoimmunity. To help combat autoimmunity in super important parts of the body, eyes, genitalia, brain, etc., then these areas become immune privileged. Basically, immune cells can't go in those areas at all. One of the most terrifying things is infections using those immune-privileged sites to their advantage. In Ebola survivors, the virus can hide in those sites and reinfect the patient later on. In one case, Ebola was in the eye of a survivor and caused his eye to change color. In other cases, Ebola was transferred as an STD because it was hiding in the genitalia of a survivor who transferred to their sexual partner. Abdominal aortic aneurysms. It's basically an aneurysm that happens in the big artery in the middle of the abdomen. It's fine and is usually asymptomatic, but when it ruptures, a patient loses all of their blood within a short period of time. The scary part is that it usually is diagnosed by accident due to annual checkups for something else. Anyone can have the disease, but especially people with Marfan syndrome, smoking, hypertensive, and hyperlipidemic. Not a scientist, but I will still take the time to mention something that scares the shit out of me. I only found out about a month ago, and I don't think a lot of other people are aware of, but probably should be. Back in 1946 to 58, the US tested 60 nuclear weapons on the Marshall Islands and buried the nuclear leftover waste and soil in a 30-foot deep cavern, sealing it with a concrete dome. The dome is cracking, and now it's leaking into the ocean, and surprise, surprise, it's not fixing itself. And the people responsible are essentially ignoring it or saying it's not their problem. Imagine Chernobyl, but bigger, and in the ocean. The Higgs Boson, which was hypothesized decades ago, was discovered via the Large Hadron Collider. Its real-life discovery proved that it's what gives mass to everything. But there is a non-zero chance that a Higgs boson can drop to a lower energy state. And because of the law of entropy, it's the preferred state to decay to a lower energy state if possible. The influence of a low energy state boson would kick off a chain reaction, causing other Higgs bosons to drop to a lower energy state. The problem with this is that if a Higgs boson drops to a lower energy state, then it can't give mass to things anymore, which has universal implications. When mass doesn't have mass anymore, it's theorized that the infinitesimal small probability of this occurring could lead to a circumstance where the universe as we know it disappears. Essentially, it would occur like an absolute void progressing through the universe, low energy state Higgs bosons infecting any other Higgs boson they come across. Maybe the closest thing to a Thanos snap, but it causes everything to disappear in the universe, but only at the speed of light rather than instantaneously. Comforting. Okay, now I know the super collider and the Higgs boson and all that, but reading that, I felt like a 4-year-old trying to read The Lord of the Rings. It was, I don't know, it's tough. What do you think? Known link between untreated hearing loss and cognitive decline, i.e. dementia. ETA, keyword is untreated. If you previously had normal hearing and it started slipping, please see an ENT and audiologist. Hearing aids have come down in cost and improved in function and aesthetic even in the last 10 years. If you're a veteran in the US, the VA will normally cover your hearing aids. If you have had hearing loss since childhood, you're not one of the ones I'm worried about. You have either learned sign language to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss or you having learned how to use hearing aids, cochlear implants to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss. The link is really between communication and cognition, not the physical ability to hear. It's just that in people who previously had normal hearing, if they don't do anything, it will impair their communication and in turn affect their cognition. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. In other words, a digital computer that is superhuman in all cognitive tasks. Humans are imbued by evolution with a sort of general learning algorithm, but it's running in a very slow biological computer with low input-output speed, talking, tapping, thumbs, reading, etc. Once we can implant that algorithm in silicone, a computer chip, there's a good chance it'll be superhuman in a matter of days or less, sort of on the level of intelligence gap you might feel between you and a mosquito. At that point, It doesn't even have to be malicious to destroy all of humanity. As Max Tegmark has put it, the real risk when artificial general intelligence isn't malice but competence. A super-intelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals, and if those goals aren't aligned with ours, we're in trouble. The implications of this would be all-encompassing. It would change the whole game, and many top experts believe it could happen within the next 10 years. Source: my professor on concrete cement structures. I'm from Malaga, Spain. It's not a terribly seismic active place. However, every 100 years or so, there's a kind of big earthquake according to historical records. We didn't have it so far, although it'd be about time. During the last 100 years, we've been building taller buildings than ever, but the law requirements for buildings weren't up to date in order to resist this sort of big earthquake. Basically, there's a huge batch of buildings waiting to collapse under this earthquake, and the issue is mostly ignored. It's one of those low-risk scenarios with a huge bill to fix them associated to them. Fortunately, new buildings are supposed to be prepared for anything you throw at them. The climate change thing is simultaneously overstated and understated. Life on Earth will not end in 10 years, no credible scientist ever claimed this, but we're in the midst of a serious loss in biodiversity and biomass, and those are not things that can be restored quickly or easily. Climate changes, but it is not supposed to change this much that quickly. And it's such a complicated system, humanity's relationship with global ecology is fundamentally unsustainable and will undergo radical alterations in the next century, whether we intend it to or not. That's the threat we face, no more and no less. The night sky is just an illusion. When you look up at a star, that star might be 80 million light years away, meaning the light from that star took 80 million years to reach Earth, which means you're looking at a star that is from 80 million years ago and isn't actually there today, which means the night sky is a night sky from millions of years ago. What would the sky look like today? There's a theory that if we can invent something to go faster than the speed of light, millions of light years away in a few days, weeks, or months, you'd be able to look back at Earth and see dinosaurs walking the planet. Time travel is real. We just don't have the advanced technology to do it. I think there's something almost romantic, if not terrifying, that we're looking at something that existed so long ago we can't even fathom it. So fascinating. Not a discovery, but aiming for one. We're in the middle of a second space race, and although in the lead, the US is quickly losing ground. And this one matters way more than the first one did. The country that wins will become the undisputable superpower on Earth for the next 200 years. It's the country to first build an Earth-lunar space elevator network. The reason being, you can only build one lunar elevator. It requires the L1 Lagrange point to build, and there's only one. Building a lunar space elevator and an Earth space elevator gives practically free access to all the resources of the solar system. For one example, there's one asteroid we know of that's solid gold, and has more than 10 times the gold all over Earth combined. The winning country will literally dominate the entire world economy with no possible way for any other country to even remotely compete. And that's just raw materials. The military advantages are insane, and the industry advantages, zero-G construction, easy vacuum access, cold welding, environment-less industry, would dominate the goods market too. And scientific and energy opportunities are without compare. And despite it being a five-way race, US, EU, China, Japan, Russia, it's getting almost no publicity because they don't want the populace freaking out.